Okay, I'm going to do another Darktable screencast. This time I'm going to be doing an overview of the noise reduction features of Darktable. The thing about the Darktable noise reduction features is that there are a lot of different options. They've come in over the development period, and they often give you a window into the same underlying algorithms of Darktable. Darktable has a lot of very powerful algorithms for noise reduction, but the various options in the user interface can be a bit confusing for new users. One thing that I wanted to mention before I go on though is my last video, the raw rate of the butterfly, there was a bug affecting the color picker when we'd cropped the image. I just wanted to say that that was fixed before I could even go and do the bug report. Obviously the Darktable developers watch my videos, which is impressive. Here's the Git history, and you can see that Ulrich fixed this bug by midday the day after I had done my video. So here's my video on the 3rd of August, and by the next day it was fixed, so thanks Ulrich. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a bunch of images that I took about 6 months ago on my old camera, and the reason I'm using these images is because they were shot under such low light conditions. This roller derby match was shot in a very dark hall, and I'm using, doing everything I can. I'm using ISO 1600, which is the maximum on my old 350D, and I'm shooting with a fast prime 50mm 1.8, and I'm using flash, and yet I struggle to get a shutter speed anywhere near 160th or whatever. So, really difficult situation. I had to use a high ISO, so it's probably a great thing to use to look at the noise. So I've gone through and I've chosen the images that I like the best. Now I was going to use this image. Okay. Now let me I've already worked on this one, so let me reset it back to the point where before we've done anything. Okay. So first things first, we need to enable the various different noise reduction modules. So we go down here to more modules, and let's turn on all the denoise ones. Let's turn on the equalizer, and let's turn on raw denoise. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the beginning to the end. Denoise profiled was designed to be the most usable option. It's kind of meant to be a single click denoiser. You can see the details about this plugin and the reasons why it was created and how it works by looking at this profiling sensor and photon noise blog post. The URL is here if you're interested. It goes through exactly what the theory is behind the way that it takes the information about the given sensor, it profiles it, and it tries to reduce two different types of noise within that image to give the highest signal to noise ratio, which basically means the highest amount of detail without the noise, or the highest amount of signal compared to the noise, if you see what I'm saying. So if you cancel a noise, the signal relative to the noise is larger than if you don't cancel a noise. The other place to look, obviously, for information about these things is the correction group area of the manual. It goes through how to use each of the modules. I'm just going to give you an overview of how I use them. So if you want more detail, come here, or again look at the screencast tutorials that Pascal Debrin's done. He's even got one specifically on denoising, which again goes into probably more depth than I do in each of these modules. One thing to mention though is that he's only working with Darktable 0.9, so I've got a lot more tools at my disposal than he did back at that time. The other place that I've been looking for information has been the archive of the Darktable users mailing list. If you want to get to the archive of the mailing list, you can do that by just going to darktable.org, contact, and the mailing lists are listed here. So you go to the users mailing list and then the archives, and here is the archive of the mailing list. Now obviously you can subscribe to this mailing list, and that'll allow you to ask questions and so forth by email, and you can do that from that same page here where you put in your email address and so forth and subscribe. Now let's go back to my summary. So here is the Denoise profiled stuff that I want to talk about. Now this is a strategy that I found on the mailing list. There's also a strategy that's listed in the manual. I'll probably use the one that's in the manual actually, and use the other one, leave the other one for you to try out. So let's go and go straight to it. Okay, so here's the Denoise profile module. Now, as I said before, it uses the information that it knows about the particular sensor and camera model that you're using, and it's meant to be the best signal to noise, so the best amount of detail without the noise as possible. So it's kind of supposed to be a single click in order to reduce the noise, and you can see already I've done a single click and the noise is really significantly reduced. You can see that it's found my camera model and ISO on here on the right, so I'll just leave that as it is in the default. So one thing though is that this is not, so there are two techniques that this module can use. By default it will use the non-local means, which seems to give a good overall result, but it might mean that you lose a bit more detail than you would like. So the suggested method is to use a non-local means instance combined with a lightness blend, and a wavelet instance combined with a color. Now you can also see that this is the strategy that this person has used, but they've gone in and added another step in the middle here with the wavelet on the lightness. So it's important to mention at this point that the order is significant that you work. So I found that the best results come from using the wavelet domain first. So we cancel the color noise first. Now you can see that here the only thing that's changing in this image is the color. Look at this red spot here. When I turn this on, the red spot disappears, the blue blotches disappear. So the color overall looks a little grayer. So essentially we're working, these red spots here get lessened, but I mean these are really hot pixels. So we're working on the color domain first, and what we're going to do is we're going to do that in a more strong fashion than we're going to do the luma noise, because the chroma noise is less obvious to the human eye than the luma noise is. So we lose, as far as the human eye perceives, if you lose detail in the color, it's less obvious than if you lose detail in the luma. So you need to be a little bit more careful in cancelling that noise in the luma or in the lightness than in the color. So we've got our instance here which is cancelling the noise in the color. I'm going to leave that at 100% opacity and a strength of 1. Obviously you can play with this strength as you see fit, but this is what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to create a new instance, and this one is going to be non-local means, and the blend mode is going to be lightness. Again, this is coming from the documentation here. So non-local means on lightness. Okay, so you can see that we've cancelled quite a bit of noise here. As I was saying before, it might be worth backing off either the strength or the blend in in the non-local means module to make sure you retain as much detail as you would like to see. So each image is different, and it's just a matter of working out what sort of noise reduction you want to apply for the particular image. The other thing you want to keep in mind at this point is that we're looking at 200% zoom. Remember, I pressed Control and I zoomed in to get to 200% zoom. Obviously this is, you know, the harshest possible result, but this is the best technique that I've found for doing it with these two different copies of the profile denoise. Let's go have a quick look. Let me take a snapshot of this. So this is with our noise applied. Let's go back before the noise, and now let's compare. Okay, so let me just drag this across so you can see the difference. Now this girl in the background is actually out of focus, keep that in mind. You can see she's actually got, I just realized she's actually got some face paint on there. Wouldn't have seen that with the noise present. Okay, so let's turn off the snapshot now. Remember that the snapshot works by taking essentially a screenshot of what you're seeing. So you saw before when I click the snapshot button, it zooms me back into the zoom level where I was, and if I zoom now, the snapshot doesn't change. So I might just reset that snapshot off and take a new one at 100%. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So now we have the noise on the left and the non-noise on the right. Now the other thing that's probably worth mentioning at this point is that you can also, with a lot of other techniques in the pipeline, you can affect the noise profile of the image, the resulting noise profile of the image. So what I might do is turn off these denoise modules and just do a quick overview of what those other things are. So I'm going to talk about sharpen for a second. So by default, if you sharpen your image and it's got a lot of noise in it, you'll actually end up accentuating that noise. Let me see if I can make this as obvious as possible. But you can see the effect that this is having on the wall in the background here. The noise is becoming more and more obvious as I sharpen the image. Let me just turn this off and turn it back on again. You can see the accentuation of those speckles in the noise. Now, one thing that you can do to counteract that is you can use this threshold. What this threshold basically means is what is the smallest thing within the image that you want to sharpen. And obviously if you make the things in the image that you're sharpening only the largest things, you're not going to affect the noise because the noise is very, very small. It's on the pixel level. So if you see here now, we're sharpening only the largest blocks of color. So you can see this halo appearing on the edge of the helmet and so forth. Or you know, on the edge of her body there is sharpening. Now that's fine if you're zoomed out. You know, you can probably see that it's, you know, sharpening these things. Obviously this is way over sharpening, but if we decrease this threshold all the way down, you'll suddenly see all this noise pop out. So one of the techniques that you can use for reducing the apparent appearance of noise is to just use a threshold where the noise is no longer being sharpened. So as I scroll this up, you'll see this noise progressively disappearing, or not disappearing, but progressively becoming less obvious. So as with anything, you're going to need to work out which amount of sharpening you want for your particular image, and remember as well that sharpness is best done at the final resolution that you're going to use the image. So if you're going to output your images for Facebook or whatever, they're going to be scaled down a lot. You'd lose any sharpening that's really subtle at a very high resolution, because when you downsample your image, the sharpness just gets mushed away, and and disappears. So just bear those things in mind. I might go through again another video about that specifically, but this is important to know about when you're doing denoising. Now, the other thing that's important is the Demosaic algorithm that you use. Demosaic is the method that any raw processor needs to use in order to take the raw pixel values that come off the sensor and convert them into red, green, blue pixels. Because of the way that the Bayer interpolation works, you'll see that with a regular Bayer pattern sensor that you've got twice as many green pixels as you do red and blue pixels. So the first thing that has to happen is the right at the beginning of the process, you don't even see it here, but before this happens you get a demosaic step. Now there's a few features in the demosaicing which you can use to reduce the appearance of noise. You can see that there's this match greens section here. This is discussed in Pascal Debrin's screencast, so if you want a little more detail on it, check that out. But what this does is it smooths the greens. It makes them more regular, which, if you think about it, would reduce the appearance of noise, because noise is variation that's introduced. Even though the values of pixels next to each other are pretty similar, the noise causes those pixels to be peaky. You know, some of them are bright, some of them are darker, just based on the noise. So if you average these pixels out, you see that they actually change in appearance. There's a few different methods for doing that. I think full average gives you a pretty good result, but so does local average. But when you disable it, you see the noise becomes a little finer, but it becomes more variable. This is just something that you might find affects later on in your pipeline the denoising. If you're really serious about denoising, then you can start looking at those things. Otherwise, I would recommend, not worrying too much about the demosaic features. So I'm just going to leave that off for now. It's just something that I wanted you to be aware of, just for completeness. Alright, so I've got my first image here. Now, this is pretty much my my denoising strategy that I use day to day, because it's the most modern tool. It gives you access to both the wavelet domain and to the non-local means methods, and I think it gives the best result to my eye anyway. So I've got a friend who also does raw processing on Linux, and he uses one of Darktable's main proprietary competitors, which is called AfterShot Pro. It used to be called Bilateral Pro, and he actually really likes the NoiseNinja noise reduction that he gets in AfterShot Pro. So I figured I'd come in here and I'd do a comparison. So here's the same image. I've tried to sort of match the exposure and so forth between them, even though they used completely different scales over here. So I've just done that by eye. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a quick look at the NoiseNinja noise reduction. Okay, so I've enabled it now. I think the default's 10. Yep. So you can see already that the noise looks quite different, or the noise reduction looks quite different. Let's zoom in to a similar sort of position on Darktable. You can already see that the cheek has been smoothed quite significantly, but the eye retains a lot of its detail, but also a lot of its noise. I see along these edges, I mean, obviously, NoiseNinja is a proprietary algorithm. You have to pay money for it, and we don't get to see the source code. But it looks to my eye as if what it's doing is applying a mask to selectively blur the parts of the image which are smooth, and exclude entirely from the noise reduction process the parts of the area that have detail. So that strategy obviously leaves a lot of detail in the around the eyes, or in the high detail parts of the image. But what it doesn't do is remove any of the noise. The noise is still very apparent here. I'm going to jack up the noise reduction now and see what sort of effect it has. Okay, to my eye it looks almost the same. 10 versus 20 looks almost the same. Now this might of course be the image that I'm using. This very, very noisy image is particularly taxing. But I'll leave it to you to decide which image you like the best. Obviously the exposure is still slightly different between the two images, but they actually give quite a different result in the noise reduction. Now, if I'm not wrong, NoiseNinja has, so we've got an extra slider over here. Let's see if we reduce the smoothing, how that does. Okay, so that brings back the noise in the cheeks and so forth. What's the strength? Strength's almost imperceptible. But the smoothing, let's jack the smoothing right up to 20. Yeah, so that just blurs the image as far as I'm concerned. Well, anyway, that's a quick demo of the noise reduction in AfterShot Pro. Let's go back to Darktable. What I'm going to do at the end of this process is I'm going to produce 100% crops of these images with the various different noise reduction techniques. Right, so let's go on to the next noise reduction technique. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop out into the light table. I'm going to take this image and I'm going to duplicate it. What this does is it creates another settings file for the image. It's the same underlying raw file, but I can have a completely separate set of settings for this next raw file. So I'm going to go back to the point before I did any noise reduction in the history stack. I'm going to compress it to get rid of all of the stuff that we don't need. Alright, so the next technique in my list is the equalizer. Now the equalizer works in the wavelet domain, which is a fancy way of saying it works with the frequencies in the image. So if you think of the different sort of levels of detail that you can imagine in an image, or if you can think of, like a frequency domain between coarse details, like this shape here is a coarse detail in the image, is down here in the coarse end, and the fine details are like the little dots that we have here, or any fine details that are in the image itself. They're affected by this area up here. Alright. So if we drag some of these handles around, you'll start to see the difference that it makes. Let's reset this. So let's pull up the fine detail, for example. Okay, you can see immediately that we've accentuated the fine detail in the image, and in this case we've accentuated the noise in the image. Let's reset. Let's pull up the coarse. Can you see what that's done? Quite a bizarre effect actually. But the biggest objects in the image, like this white color of her legs, or their helmets, have become, or the black shirt for example, have become accentuated in a way. Let's turn it off and turn it back on. You can see that. So the biggest blocks of color have been affected by that process. Let's reset that. Let's pull up the middle. We can see that the medium-sized details in the image now got affected, like these stripes or these dots, or even just the texture of the floor. Let's pull that down and you'll see that the effect you get is a blur instead. So we now have the fine details still, things like the features of their faces and so forth, but we've lost a lot of detail in the middle. And if we pull this down on the end, you can see it just basically blurs the whole thing out. So we were working in the Luma channel there, but obviously the same thing occurs in the color. You can't see any difference there, but there we go, the big details, lots of color, little bit of color. medium details, lots of color, little bit of color. So you can see, and now we've got sharpening, and but you can see the effect that the equalizer has. Obviously, it's quite a complex tool, and there's quite a lot to know about it. So I'll probably do another video about just the equalizer. But what I'd like you to look at, just from a simple point of view, is the presets that we have here. They're a great place to start when you don't understand really the full detail, like I don't, about the equalizer. You can see there's a bunch of different things that you can apply to the image. Obviously we're interested in these Denoise presets. So let's zoom in on our image again to the same place that we've been working with. And let's apply the subtle denoise. You can see it's already had a really good effect on the most obvious noise there. You can see here the effect that's been done. You can see these in the various different domains. So the luma has been pulled up slightly from the bottom. The chroma has been pulled up. You can see the chroma has been done essentially twice as strong as the luma, just like we did in our previous strategy with our 2 copies of the profile denoise. The chroma has been done strongly and the luma has been done half as strong. Sharpness hasn't been changed at all. So that's the subtle one. Now we go to the medium denoise. You can see that more detail has been lost, but the image is overall smoother. Now the luma has been pulled up quite a lot more strongly, and the chroma, well, it's pretty much been left alone. And if we go to the strong denoising now, again we lose even more detail. You can see that the sharpness has now been pulled down in the highest detail points. So let's say you wanted to get some of that sharpness back, you could fiddle with these handles here. So the chroma has been pulled now up to a much stronger level in the higher frequencies, and the luma has also been, well, the luma's been pulled from here up to about there. Okay, so I personally wouldn't use the strong method on this one, but let's leave it on, say, just the middle technique. Okay, so that's the equalizer's denoise features. Let's go create another copy of our image. Duplicate, go into our new image. Let's get rid of the equalizer and compress the history stack. Okay, so here we are. Our next technique, denoise non-local means. Okay, you can see already the noise has been reduced quite significantly. But there's still quite a bit there. So let's have a fiddle with the strength. So you can see the luma is being affected 50% as much as the chroma. This is a common theme throughout all of the noise reduction modules. So that's a good rule of thumb. Now Pascal de Bruyne gave a good rule of thumb in his video, which is use the ISO divided by 10 as the starting point for the luma and do the chroma twice as strong as that. Now obviously I'm using ISO 1600, which means that I can't use 160% on the luma, so why don't I just push this up just a little bit. So you can see that's already looking much better. I really quite like that 75% there. Now obviously you can play with the strength as well. That's made it slightly smoother. I'm starting to lose a lot of detail here. If I pull back, I'm starting to see the noise creep through again. So what I might do is leave the strength at 50% and leave the luma up here at 75. This patch size, the bigger the patch size, it looks like the less of an effect. So the smaller patch size has more of a blurring effect. I'm just going to leave that at 2. Okay, so that's my second, or sorry, I think my third image, isn't it now? So let's go back out to the light table, duplicate our image, and move on to our next technique. We have the bilateral filter. Okay, now be aware that the bilateral filter has some serious requirements in the memory stakes. So if you don't have a powerful computer, you might see errors or crashes or whatever when it runs out of memory. Just be aware of that. Okay, let's go turn off our non-local means and compress our history stack to remove it from there. Okay, bilateral. Let's turn this thing on. Don't see much of an effect so far. Now remember, as I was saying before, that the green channel is the most important one for the luma noise. So let's push this up a little and see what happens. Okay, maybe the red, let's see if we can change the red denoising a little and see if that spot disappears. Yeah, it does. And let's pull up the blue. Okay, it's already starting to look smoother. I think I'm going to push the greens up a little more. Yeah, let's have a look at the radius. Just a little smaller radius result. I can only see a change here. Clearly, when we're a massive radius versus a small radius, there is a difference in the image. Feels to me like there's more detail when the radius is larger. So perhaps the denoising effect. Okay, the spatial extent of the Gaussian. So it's applying a blur. So I would expect a smaller blur to leave more detail in the image. Looks like I've sort of reached the limits of what I'm going to get out of this tool, so I might just back it off a little until I reach the point where I see the best image, basically. Okay, what's the default? 15. I think that's too much in this particular case. Okay, well that's the result. I'm not sure I like that as much as the other modules, but it's clearly less noisy. Let's go on to, what's our next? Raw denoise. So raw denoise comes from the DC raw module. It's quite a simple technique, and you'll see it in raw therapy or the various other Linux raw processing tools that come from DC raw, or that depend on DC raw. So let's try this thing. You can see it's quite a simple module. We either have we've got a threshold which looks like it applies quite a strong Gaussian blur of some kind, so we really have quite a strong dependency of detail loss to the noise reduction. Obviously we could use some kind of blend and reduce the opacity or something like that to get a more subtle effect, kind of, you know, half cancel the noise if you like. Yeah, but I mean, I don't think I could ever see myself using that because it's not as good as the other approaches that Darktable has. But again, it's up to you. It's really up to you what you prefer the look of. Alright, and we've discussed the matching greens in the highlight reconstruction, and we've done our comparison with NoiseNinja. Okay, so I've finished now the overview of all of the different noise reduction techniques that I know about. If anybody has any noise reduction techniques that they particularly like, or if they've used the modules that I've used in a different technique that they think, or in a different manner that they think results in better results, please let me know, leave a comment below the video or on G+, or on the Darktable users mailing list. I'd love to see any other techniques that people use. Otherwise, I'm just going to go and copy the sharpening from the first image that we did so that it's consistent across all of our denoised images. Okay, so I've now sharpened all the images the same, so that's not going to introduce any difference. Now I'm going to output the images to JPEG, and cool. And I'm going to do 100% crops of particular points of those images and just put them all next to each other in a single image, and I'll put a link to that image down below the video. So if you want to go and compare for yourself, do some pixel peeping for yourself, please feel free. Otherwise, yeah, let me know if there's any technique that I missed or that would be better. Okay, thanks for listening.